This is Naked Mormonism.
I pledge my life, all that I may have. I will strive to the utmost of my ability to be what you would want me to be.
It's time to find the truth.
And having set our hand to the plow, we will never look back until this work is finished.
Where is the church going?
I have faith that the Constitution will be saved as prophesied by Joseph Smith. But it will not be saved in Washington. It will be saved by enlightened members of this church.
The explicit tag is there for a reason, so if you get offended at what's said, it's not for you. But most importantly,
may you ponder the truths you've heard. May they help you become even better than you were.
Skepticize everything.
Hey there, everybody. Today's episode is just kind of something to hold you over while we work on getting out the regular episode a couple days late. And there's a reason for that. If you're listening in the backlog, this isn't going to matter to you one bit. You're just going to hit skip and go to the next episode. But I just got back from Sunstone and a whole bunch of really fun stuff that happened in Salt Lake City. And I just want to tell you guys all about it. So this episode that you're listening to right now, the main portion is Marie, my co-host on My Book of Mormon podcast, talking about various things, including Sunstone and some other stuff that we did while we were in Salt Lake City. But I kind of want to do a little bit of a Sunstone wrap up because I did one of these last year when I went to Sunstone for the first time. And this time it was so much better than last time, just for a myriad of reasons. And on top of Sunstone, we did a couple of other things that were really awesome. So let me just kind of walk you through chronologically. I got to Salt Lake essentially on Wednesday at the end of the day, but started the day on Thursday. That was July 27th. That was the first day of Sunstone. And it was really, really awesome. I spent most of the time not going to presentations, but handing out booklets to various people about the presentation that Cody and I were doing about the Smith-entheogen theory, and it was incredibly well received. You're going to hear all about that with the portion with Marie, so I'm going to skip over telling you about that and just kind of wrap up a couple of thoughts that I had about Sunstone. One thing that I do enjoy so much about this Sunstone Symposium every year is that it's a place where people can come for honest and open discourse, where people can present their ideas and know that they're probably going to be challenged on those ideas. And it's very friendly and very pleasant type of discourse, even if somebody who you're talking to is complete opposite from you on the belief spectrum. I talked to a number of fundamentalist Mormons, people that follow the teachings of polygamy and practice it actively. One of these groups of people was the Church of Christ, Christ's Church, and they did a panel called Millennial Mormon, or Millennial Fundamentalists, where they had an entire panel of people. I think I talk a little bit about this with Marie, but it was just a fascinating panel to see this group of, kids, basically, like myself. I'm only 26. The oldest person on that panel was 24, all the way down to, I think it was 16 or so. It was just very interesting to kind of get their take on their upbringing and why they believe in Christ Church and this real impressive sense of family and community that's instilled in this small cloister of people who practice polygamy and following Christ's fundamental church. I don't understand exactly where they derive polygamy from Christ's teachings specifically. I don't think there's any scriptural reference or backing up for that, at least from Christ's teachings in the New Testament. But they do indeed follow Joseph Smith's teachings and Brigham Young's teachings, and they stick with the belief of polygamy and various other fundamentals in early Mormonism. It was very fascinating to see these people presenting and talking about the world that they know, that they perceive to be the world, and talking about how their feelings and their testimonies have grown in practicing this church and in following this. And it was awesome because there was the Q&A section, and I was able to get up and ask them some questions. I found out later that a few of them were not very happy with the questions that I presented, the line of questioning, because it was almost a bit of a conversation. And I felt bad about that because I in no way wanted to make any of them uncomfortable. I wanted them to see that there's somebody in secular Mormonism that's an atheist, that's not a baby-eating devil worshiper. And that's kind of the air that I wanted to present, but apparently it didn't convey. It just kind of I just sounded like an asshole, I think. So we ended up spending most of the day Saturday after lunch. I spent talking to a number of them on a one-on-one basis. And it was really cool because we ended up parting on the most amicable and friendly terms, shaking each other's hands, giving hugs, and saying, I can't wait to see you next year at Sunstone and see how you're doing. A couple of them are interested in listening into the show. A few of them, gave me their Doctrine and Covenants, their own proprietary Doctrine and Covenants that has a few extra revelations in it from John Taylor and Wilford Woodruff and whatnot. And they definitely petitioned me to read it, and I look forward to reading it. It's just this open and honest community where sharing of information is the only prerequisite. And, taking down those defensive personal walls about your beliefs is the prerequisite for walking in the door. And it's held on a college campus, which I think truly embodies the best nature of what open inquiry is about, that's what college campuses are for, to exchange ideas. All in all, Sunstone was an amazing experience. I spoke to many more people than just these Christ Church fundamentalists, and I saw many friends. And I'm not going to list all of the people that I saw from last year that it seemed like we just carried on the conversations we had from last year. I spent a lot of time hanging out with quite a few people that I've known for a bit of time, including Marie and Joel and Cody and Scott Toxic and Julie and a few other people that we would go to different presentations, and then we would convey in between presentations and talk about what we just saw. And it was just so much fun. It was really cool. And I have to say, if you're a person that is interested in having this kind of open discourse about Mormonism, or Mormonism is just a topic that interests you in any way, shape, or form, which, if you're listening to the show, come on, of course Mormonism interests you to some level. I really do, on a personal level, I recommend that you try to go to a Sunstone. They don't have it just in Salt Lake City. They have the Northwestern up in Seattle, where that's in November, where I'm going. They have it in San Diego and Phoenix and Kirtland, and they have these Sunstones everywhere. If you are interested in this and in chasing this further, please check out sunstonemagazine.com, and that's where you can see these announcements for the upcoming symposiums that they have. And if you feel like you have something to contribute to the community, it's really easy to get a block of time. And the organizers run an incredibly professional conference. It's just amazing. Lindsay Hanson-Park is on one of the, I guess she's on basically over the organizing board for the entire symposium. And she's just an amazing person, just amazing to talk to, always gives you her time, even when she doesn't have any time. And she will see to it that your presentation is attended to and interesting, and make sure that you have a block of time where you can present. When I sent in the request to get a time block where there was no other history presentations, so that the people who are interested in the history of the church will not be torn between multiple presentations in my hour block, she accommodated that request, or the organizing board for Sunstone accommodated that request. And it was just amazing because I didn't feel like I had to compete against another history presentation. So Sunstone is just a great place. And granted, not all of the presentations are Class A informative and incredible presentations. There are a number of them that are, you go to and you walk out and say, well, I could have done with going to a different one, but I'm still glad that I went there. There were a couple of presentations that I felt that way about, but they also take on some, there are also some presentations, like Christopher Smith's this time around. He presented on a claim that he says he didn't think that Joseph Smith initially wanted to found a religion, and that it was Oliver Cowdery who pushed Joseph Smith to found the religion. And when I saw him on Thursday morning, I started talking to him a little bit and asking him about his presentation. I said, I wholeheartedly disagree, because I don't, his presentation was on Saturday, I believe. Anyway, so I met him on Thursday morning and talked to him about it. And I told him, that goes completely against the Joseph Smith that I've constructed in my head based on what I've read about him. I always know Joseph Smith as being this guy who enjoys the spotlight and who wants to be the answers guy. When somebody has a problem, they go to Joseph Smith and he takes care of it. That seems to be the Joseph Smith that I understand. And Chris said, well, that version of Joseph Smith, I will not shatter any illusions about that version, because this is perfectly in line with what you think. And I figured that those were two inversely related things. But lo and behold, in his presentation, he just went through some of the earliest revelations that are included in the Book of Commandments, or the Doctrine of Covenants, the Book of Covenants, whatever you want to call it. And he did make out his case very methodically that Joseph Smith wanted to be essentially a religious leader, but he didn't want to found a religion. That it was indeed Oliver Cowdery who kind of planted the idea in Joseph Smith's mind that founding a religion is about the only way to get what he wants in life, which is, throngs of people who are attentive to him and listening to everything he says and hanging on every last word that falls out of Joseph Smith's mouth. Fascinating presentation. It was really, really awesome. All that being said, the few presentations I did attend were just fantastic. But the best part about it was the accessibility to all of these Mormon historians who I, thoroughly revere. Go back into the backlog and listen to last year's Sunstone episode, and there are, I think, 5 or 6 interviews with podcasters and with Mormon historians with whom I spoke during that Sunstone, and just about a myriad of topics. And those people were there again this year with a couple of exceptions. And it was really cool to just, kind of pick up on the conversation that we left off on last year and discuss with them some historical topics, because Mormon historians always want to talk about Mormon history. So the accessibility of Sandra Tanner, D. Michael Quinn, H. Michael Marquardt, these amazing historians, Christopher Smith, that normally I'm just reading books that they have written, and I'm reading the musings that are falling out of their skull. I was able to actually have the conversations with these people. So Sunstone was just an amazing experience. Now, of course, after Sunstone, Marie and I did the live Book of Mormon show, My Book of Mormon show, I should say, at Squatter's Pub, and that was amazing. So initially, the turnout was absolutely surprising. I'm completely baffled by the turnout. So to everybody listening right now that did come, thank you so much. It was the audience that really made it a success. But initially, when I talked to Doug, who runs Squatters, he set us out in this little, I think it was the atrium, this small area that, I was, fingers crossed, I was hoping we could fill with, a couple dozen seats, and just, really, really hoping that we would have enough turnout that this room would have people in it. And by the time we got there on Saturday night, Doug had moved us up to the second floor and had closed it off to everybody and made it just so that we were the only people up on the second floor. And we filled the main area of the second floor. If I had to guess, I would say, there's maybe 40 people there, maybe more. I don't know, give or take. And it was just so much fun, because normally when Marie and I are doing a show, we're staring at a little Skype logo on our computer screen. That's the most exposure that Marie and I get to each other whenever we're making an episode. But this, we actually got to talk to people there and feed off of the crowd and see the reactions from people. And there was, of course, a drinking game associated with all of it. And it was just so much fun. So I have a huge thanks to give to Doug for donating the space, and for all of the people that made this a success, mostly to Marie, because she really helped a lot in putting this whole thing together. And, of course, above and beyond everything, thank you to those of you who did come out. It was just so much fun to see you and talk to you one-on-one and do a live show. It was the first live show. Granted, we learned some things. There are some things moving forward that we will be incorporating or not doing that we learned from. But it was a really, really fun experience, and we have you to thank for that. So just huge thanks. I owe a huge debt of gratitude to everybody that made it a success. Moving on, after that, on Tuesday night, it was fantastic. We went to the Book of Mormon play, the one by Matt Stone and Trey Parker, the South Park guys that did this Book of Mormon musical that's won a number of Tonys, and it's highly revered. Granted, I saw it in Denver with a few people, and that was fun, but seeing it in Salt Lake City when they're singing about Salt Lake City and the Promised Land and Zion and these amazing concepts that Salt Lake City doesn't fall into any of these categories of fulfilling, let's just say they had a home field advantage. A lot of the jokes really hit home a lot more. The crowd was way more intense than it was in Denver just because everybody got all of the insider jokes, and it was just absolutely amazing. So, if you have an opportunity to see to see the Book of Mormon, I've only ever seen a few Broadway shows in my time, and it is by far and away, not only because of my own interest in Mormonism, but just by all standards of measurement for Broadway shows, it's one of the best Broadway shows out there. Just amazing. So, in addition to that, one more thing I forgot to tell everybody about. On Monday, Marie, Annie, and I went walking around Temple Square, and we saw we went into the visitor centers, and we spoke with a couple of missionaries very briefly, but we walked through all of the tours that they have there, and that was just so much fun. You can look at the My Book of Mormon Twitter handle as well as the Naked Mormonism Twitter handle to see a bunch of pictures that we took. But the really cool thing is we went to the conference center. Now, anyone who lives in Utah or around Salt Lake City, you've probably seen the conference center. But for those of you who aren't aware or don't know about the conference center, essentially it was this building that's an entire square block of Salt Lake City in downtown Salt Lake, right across from Temple Square, and prime property, amazing plot of land that they're set on. But it was fascinating to tour this conference center. And the one thing that kept occurring to me is this center is 1.4 million square feet. It is made exclusively from imported Italian marble and gray white granite, similar look to the Salt Lake City Temple. And when we went through it, the tour guide told us a number of things that kind of stuck out to me. He said that all of the fixtures, all of the fountains and everything that are included in there were all made specifically for this. It's not like they went to a fountain manufacturer and bought ones that they already had. It was all specifically commissioned just for this building. And in addition to that, there's artwork in just everywhere around on a bunch of the walls in the conference center, and almost all of them are original pieces. Or they were like the actual, like the guy, I think it's Friedman, that did all of the Book of Mormon artwork that you see when you open up your Book of Mormon. They have original prints of all of those up there. So it's filled with essentially priceless artwork and portraits of prophets come and gone, and of apostles from the earliest organization all the way up to modern day. They have portraits of all of the apostles in a hallway in a room. And they have bronze castings of busts of all of the prophets. And the artwork in there is just absolutely amazing. Everything about it is absolutely amazing. And the tour guide, the missionary tour guide, told us that apparently there wasn't a manufacturer in the United States who had the capabilities of constructing the support trellises for the center itself, for the Colosseum part of it, I guess you could call it. So they had to commission a European manufacturer and then ship them all over separately and assemble them in Salt Lake. This was a project that they had a 3-year timeline on. And all I could think of is they must have thrown gobs of money at this center. And just incomprehensible amounts of money at this place. You know what? I'm going to do a Google search real quick. I asked the missionary who was giving us the tour if there is a dollar value associated with the conference center. And he said, oh, not that I'm aware of, or at least they haven't told me. But he did say that they spared no expense to make this happen. I'm going to do some quick cursory searching here to see if I can find a dollar value on this conference center, because maybe that will help to contextualize exactly how exquisite this piece of architecture really is. Okay, so here are just some brief stats on it. Here we have, it is 1.4 million square feet, or 130,000 square meters. It seats 21,200 people in the main auditorium. All seats in the audience have an unobstructed view of the pulpit because the roof is held up by radial trusses. And those trusses are the things that were manufactured in Europe and had to be shipped over separately and assembled. Behind the podium is a 7,667 pipe and 130 rank Showstein pipe organ. So there are over 7,600 pipes that accompany the organ, or that make the music done by the organ. Underground parking garage that can hold 1,400 cars. A modernist 3-story chandelier hangs in a modest? Oh, modernist. Okay. 3-story chandelier hangs in the skylight in the interior of the building. A waterfall descends from the spire. So on and so forth. Let me do a little bit more looking here. Apparently it's on 3 acres of grass. Sorry, no. I was mistaken. The roof is landscaped, and it has, just on the roof, there's about 3 acres of grass. That's just on the roof of this building. Give me a second to keep looking into this to see if there's a dollar value associated with this thing. All right, so in searching, I found a New York Times article about this. It took a little bit of time. It says, what all this costs is undisclosed. After discussing a fair amount about this thing, the church keeps its finances secret. Imagine that. Members are encouraged to tithe, to donate 10% of their income to the church, a principle shared by many evangelical and some mainline Protestant churches. So on and so forth. Mormon America, by a recent book called Mormon America by Richard and Joan Osling, in an analysis of church assets and income, estimates that tithing generates more than $5 billion annually for the church. Church officials say the figure is exaggerated. The officials also declined to disclose the price of the conference center, but a local newspaper, the Salt Lake Tribune, reported the cost at about, hold your breath, $240 million. $240 million. Okay. This place is exquisite. Okay. No possible expense was spared in constructing this magnificent piece of architecture. And add into that the fact that the timeline was absolutely unprecedented, trying to get it done in 3 years, which they were successfully able to do. It's a baffling thing to think about. And the only thing that I could think about the whole time I was there is this conference center, the bill to just keep this thing running, nothing to do with the construction, just air conditioning, staffing, security, all of the maintenance, the overhead costs, the general overhead costs have to rack up really high. And I don't think that number is available anywhere. We have to wait for D. Michael Quinn's Mormon Money book to come out here in September. I would assume that he talks about it. I really hope. But they have this building constructed for 2 weekends per year. 2 weekends a year. Granted, they have a couple of other concerts, like I think they have a Christmas concert or something, but the use for this, it is called the LDS Conference Center because they have their semi-annual conference in October and April held there. And the rest of the time, this building sits completely vacant. Air conditioning running, water fountains running, all maintenance personnel, janitorial personnel, security, everybody full-time employed, making sure that this ship still, runs. And it stays empty for 99.8% of the year. Empty. Not a single person in there for a church purpose other than missionaries to lead free tours of people. That's it. It's on an entire city block of prime Salt Lake City real estate in downtown. This is supposed to be a church who champions their humanitarian abilities and how much good they do for the poor and needy when there are thousands of homeless people in Salt Lake City everywhere, especially in downtown area. Thousands of them. And this building sits empty. They can't put up tents in it. They can't make some low-income housing out of it. They can't use it for anything good other than just 10 hours of conference for, 2 weekends out of every year. That's what they use this for. And it occurred to me that out of everything astonishing that this missionary was telling us about this conference center, it is nothing but a status symbol. Okay, for those 2 weekends a year, you can make the argument that it's necessary for their worldwide general conference to have the 21,000 seats filled and have that many members come and patronize the church, essentially. Maybe it's useful for that. But the only reason is for those conferences to show how incredibly well off and wealthy the church is. It's this idea, it's the perfect embodiment of the prosperity doctrine. If you're a righteous church, then you're going to do well. So by those standards, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is one of the most righteous churches on the planet, right? But if we judge righteousness by the amount of happiness that it engenders in the followers, or judge that metric by how many people it helps on a yearly basis who are in need, this is not a good church. They flaunt their wealth when there are people who are homeless and sick just outside of the doors begging for change. This is not... say what you want about the historicity of Jesus Christ. People say that Christ's teachings are some of the best things you can do. Love your fellow neighbor as thyself, and love the Lord thy God, right? But it's also like we have to interpret the teachings of Jesus through what he did. And that does include hanging out with the people who were downtrodden, who were sickly, with the prostitutes and the vagabonds, with the people who were outsiders of society, with lepers, with sickly people. Jesus spent his time helping the people who were less fortunate than him, being a demigod, and people who were opposed, or people who were subjugated by the government. And how can this be considered a church of that person when this is what it does in its practice? Okay, the church can say that it does so many good things for humanitarian efforts and whatnot, but what you say doesn't mean shit compared to what you actually do. And what you actually do is construct a multi-hundred millions of dollars building in downtown Salt Lake City in the face of people who can't afford to eat, who can't afford a home, who can't afford to get out of the cold in winter. When people don't have a home that they can go to with air conditioning when it's 103 degrees in downtown. I mean, what metric do you use to judge the goodness of a church or of any community? And I would say you have to judge them by their actions. And these are the church's actions. They build these incredibly beautiful, great and spacious buildings which are directly anathema to the teachings in the Book of Mormon and of Jesus Christ. And they claim to be the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And we're supposed to buy it? We're supposed to say that's what you say you are, that you say that you're doing so much good for people? And we can't question the foundation of that? We can't really ask, if you're really a Church of Jesus Christ, shouldn't you help some poor people? Shouldn't you heal the sick with more than just prayers? Maybe, pay for their medical bills or something? It's just fascinating to see this. And beyond that, of course, after we went and toured this great and spacious building, Marie, Annie, and I went to the City Creek Center to get some ice cream. And that's an amazing testament to just how much the church is actually a business, because the City Creek Center is, I believe it's 2 or 3 city blocks. And the price tag on that thing is, I've seen it estimated from $3 to $6 billion. Billion. I mean, that's not helping any homeless people. That's not helping anybody who's subjugated or downtrodden. What do you consider the goodness of a church? I mean, these are things that it's really hard to try and reconcile when walking around Salt Lake City, because you see these monuments to the church's wealth, and you see just how contrary that runs to the teachings of the church, and it's a level of cognitive dissonance that I don't know how any believing members of the church can live with. I don't know. It just some random musings on that trip. I think it really hit home this time, walking through Temple Square and the conference center and City Creek Center. Yeah. Anyway, so all in all, it's been an amazing week. I told you guys that it's going to be a couple days before we get the regular history episode out. I'm working on that right now as we speak, but I couldn't just leave you guys hanging on the regular Thursday release date. So that's what you're getting today. And now I'm just going to kick you over to the conversation that Marie and I recorded in City Creek Center, actually. You're going to hear some background noise and whatnot, but that's because we were outside sitting on a bench. There's some wind and stuff and people walking by. Occasionally a car drives by. I'm going to try and clean up the audio as much as possible, but just to let you know, it's not perfect. But what Marie and I talk about is a lot of fun, and Marie is just the best co-host. She was so much fun to spend time with this week. So with all that said, I hope you enjoy this last bit, this second portion of today's episode, and I'll be talking to you soon here on a regular episode. We are sitting here outside at the City Creek Center after a wonderful day of touring around church history sites, but it's not just me. It's my co-host.
Hello, it's Marie Kent from My Book of Mormon podcast.
Thank you so much for joining me for this.
Anytime, Bryce. We have had a lovely day.
It's been kind of magical, hasn't it?
It has. Right now we are sitting in the church-owned mall.
Yeah. How about that?
It's blowing my mind almost as much as getting a private tour of the great and spacious building.
My God. Okay. What are your impressions of... Okay, so I want to talk about Sunstone, because that's why you're here, that's why we're here. Sorry, everybody, there's extra noise.
There's a car slowly driving by, but it's a hybrid, so it's not too loud.
And we're also outside. There's not a quiet place to record here. This is the best we can do. Sorry about the extra noise and the weird audio sounding. But anyway, I want to talk to you about Sunstone. But more importantly, for right now, let's start off by talking about what we did today. We toured the great spacious building.
We did. Yeah.
Many of them, actually.
I came into Salt Lake City, of course, for Sunstone Symposium, and so I had today off, as did your lovely, lovely lady, Annie. She's sitting like 30 feet away playing on her cell phone.
Because she could not care less about this.
She could not. She was such a good sport. You should head over to my Twitter feed at My Book of Mormon, because she took a bunch of pictures of Bryce and I.
Yes.
Being ridiculous. Like, we nerded out at a level that kind of, I think, scared our tour guide at the Great and Spacious Building. Yeah, because he was starting to give his spiel of this is what General Conference is. This just like basics. Like, if we didn't know anything Mormonism related, this is what he'd say.
What is okay? You've said Great and Spacious Building a couple of times.
Yeah.
For anyone who doesn't know and wants to Google it, what is this actual building?
Oh, is this a pop quiz? It's a building that was commissioned by Gordon B. Hinckley.
Yes.
In 1997, and he decided he wanted to have it built by the year 2000.
To enter the new
millennium. And it has 21,000 seats in it.
Yes, 1.4 million square feet in downtown Salt Lake City.
There are gardens on the roof. There are water features.
And tell us, what is the point of this conference center?
It's to hold general conference twice a year.
That's it?
That's it.
And occasional, like, Christmas conferences or concerts.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's massive.
It's a 1.4 million square foot building that is used basically twice a year to house people from all over the world, 21,000 of them, to sit for 8 hours for a weekend, actually 10 hours for a weekend.
listening to conference talks. Yes, that's what it's for.
Yeah.
And it is opulent, and it's very nice.
Oh, my God. It is. You cannot possibly conceive of how much money they blew on this thing. And 3 years was a blindingly ambitious timeline to put for this thing.
Like, think about how long it would take if you decided you wanted to buy a house and have it built from scratch. And it would be, like a year and a half. And it would be delayed by a couple months because something went wrong, right? No, this conference center can have... It's so big that a 747 could be inside it comfortably.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're...
My God.
Yeah, I'm serious. Check out my Twitter feed for the pictures, because there's a couple where Bryce and I were just like holding our heads because our brains are about to explode.
Yeah.
And
there's one picture where we're up on top of the roof of it, because the roof it's like a plaza. Well, they didn't have the fountains running in it at this time, but it's beautiful gardens. You walk around. They have like some kind of meaning of all of the various gardens and like why certain plants or certain areas. But like, it's also 4 stories up. And straight across the street is Temple Square. And there's one picture of us with the Salt Lake City Temple behind us while we're up on the 4th floor. Like, it's just magnificent. And the view of the entire valley from that...
It's gorgeous.
It's just incredible.
Yes.
Beautiful building.
So, I mean, if you don't know already, but Bryce and I have mad knowledge about the history of Mormonism. And granted, my history stops at 1832. But when we just know a lot that... I think our tour guide did not expect us to know, and eventually he just said, "Are you students? Are you history majors?" And we're like, "No, we are enthusiastic supporters of history."
Yep, and researchers, and we just enjoy it so much. So.
And really, that's why we're here. Like, I came originally to Sunstone because, of course, I'm curious, but I really wanted to hear your talk.
Yeah.
So
it
went well. So, okay, Bryce, tell us about your talk.
Okay, so before we talk about the talk, because I really want to get to that. Preface this with kind of your opinion of Sunstone overall coming to this, because you have a name tag that says "I am blank Mormon" that you're supposed to fill out. What did you put on yours?
I am a disconnected Mormon enthusiast.
Perfect way to describe it, because you're just like a Mormon nerd, but not actually Mormon. You just are interested, fascinated by it. Did you feel like you were a disconnected enthusiast on the outside? Did you feel like you were an outsider at any point?
I never felt like an outsider. In fact, what I liked the most was that it was so inclusive, because it was inclusive of me as an atheist who will never believe, but they also had some, like, because everybody had their name tags and they were writing in what they were, and so there were definitely a bunch of like, I am post-Mormon, I am ex-Mormon. There was also I am a gay believing Mormon, and I was like, well, that's awesome. And I saw one man, he had written I'm a super fundy Mormon.
Wow.
Yeah, so it really...
And there were a number of polygamous fundamentalists there as well, and they did talks and panels with Q&As where you could go up and ask them questions, and it's made for open and honest discourse. It was really cool to go to some of those presentations. Yeah,
because it was open and honest, and I feel like everyone went there and the presenters had all researched their topic to varying degrees. You and Cody definitely researched yours very heavily, more than any of the other ones that I saw. But no one was just like, well, I believe this because I just know it. Like, no, they're like, I believe this thing, or this is my experience, and here's what specifically happened to me, or this is why I believe what I do, or this is why I don't believe what I do. And there were presentations by true believing Mormons saying, there are some issues in the church. Here's what I think we should do to resolve them. Let's work together as a church to fix this issue that I see as important in the church.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that it encourages the discourse, too. It encourages hard questions during the Q&A sections. And like people are hoping for that. I mean, when I was talking to the fundamentalists, Christ Church that are there, one of the people there, Jeremy, he came up to me specifically because on Thursday morning I kind of got into it, atheist versus theist, typical useless debate. But he encouraged me multiple times and came up to me, sought me out specifically and said, please come to our presentation. We're doing millennial fundamentalists. And they had a panel of 8 people that are millennial fundamentalists. The oldest person was 24 on the panel. And it was like, he wanted the hard questions, and I gave him the hard questions. And I ended up having very amicable conversations and parting on friendly terms with every single person on the panel that I could find afterwards and talk to. But then, they knew that those were hard questions and that I was not buying into what they were saying.
But they still wanted you there, and that was the whole spirit of Sunstone.
Exactly.
It was amazing. I highly recommend it to everyone.
Yes.
I'll be back next year.
Presentation time. I have to talk about this because you got to see more presentations than I did. Because I spent the majority of my time not going to presentations because I wanted to attend these presentations, but there wasn't enough time. Mm-hmm. I was tracking down Mormon historians and talking to them about the presentation that I was giving with Cody about the Joseph Smith-entheogen theory. Joseph Smith using hallucinogenic and psychedelic drugs. And I mean, one of the first people I saw is Christopher C. Smith. Longtime listeners of the show will remember I had him on quite a while ago talking about his discourse, his PhD doctorate discourse about the Mormon conquest and for the against the Native Americans in Utah. And after we flipped off the mic, I talked to him a little bit about the Joseph Smith-entheogen theory, see if he thought that it was plausible or not. And he totally didn't buy it. He said, I think there are 100 other explanations that are much better than drugs, and I just don't see any evidence for it. And that's Christopher Smith. So on Thursday morning, he was one of the first people that I saw at the check-in table. So I came up to him and I said, Chris, dude, it's good to see you. I look forward to seeing your presentation because he gave an amazing presentation on Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery. And I told him when my presentation was going to be. I handed him one of the booklets because we had these booklets printed up. We printed up 200 of them. I only have 5 left. It was perfect. And so he said, okay, I'll attend, see what you have to say. I don't buy it, but I'll see what information you have.
That's very Sunstone.
Yeah. And that was the first historian that I talked to. Then I tracked down D. Michael Quinn, talked to him. Then I tracked down Sandra Tanner, talked to her. Tracked down H. Michael Marquardt, talked to him. A bunch of very powerful mover and shaker historians in this field who remember me from Sunstone last year because I sat down and interviewed them all for 5 or 10 or 20 minutes. Yeah. They said, well, this is interesting. I've never considered it. And I would sit down and have a 5 or 10 or 20-minute conversation with them, hand them a booklet, show them a couple of extracts out of it. And every single one of them said, I really haven't thought about it, but it makes sense. And I look forward to your presentation. And all but one of those historians went to that presentation.
Your presentation was very well attended.
It was great. Yeah. I was surprised at the turnout, really.
Yeah, I'd say there's, 80?
So
80 to 100?
The room sits, I think, 100 people, and there were probably 10 to 20 empty seats.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
we were very
full.
packed.
Yeah, definitely. And there were a bunch of historians that I didn't get a chance to talk to prior to it that attended also. Cheryl Bruno was one of them. Joe Geisner was there. A bunch of these people who are movers and shakers in this community were interested in this. And we had the information to back it up.
You
and what's
did.
Interesting is Robert Beckstead, who's a PhD, I think he's an anesthesiologist or something, doctor. He presented on this at Sunstone in 2007, and it was called Restoration of the Sacred Mushroom. But he made some assertions that Mormon historians shied away from, so they threw the baby out with the bathwater. So a few of them said, I remember a presentation about this a long time ago, I didn't buy it. And we said in our paper multiple times, Cody and I do, that Robert Beckstead set the foundation for this. He laid the blueprints, but here's where we take issue. Here is where we think his paper was weak, and here is what we need to fill in the blanks. And we presented it. We filled up the holes in his theory.
Yeah, you were very methodical in your presentation because you started off right away that, yes, we were going to be talking about Joseph Smith potentially using psychedelic drugs while he was receiving revelation. And I say that in air quotes. But then you went through, let's talk about what constituted medicine at that time.
Yeah, exactly.
Which, because we think of medicine today as pills, and you pointed this out
pills
right away.
Yeah,
everything is standard and everything has an FDA drug trial, but this was when medicine was you mix some random stuff with turpentine and then you drink it.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's set the stage here.
Yeah, and so Cody was the first presenter, and he just covered kind of the history of entheogens and sacramental rituals that incorporated that. There's abundant evidence that they incorporated these psychedelic drugs, these entheogens, into their sacramental procedures. And that kind of, I think, set the stage and made it feel a bit more normalized, because at the same time, he was talking about drugs and how we view drugs today as completely worlds apart from how they viewed what they considered drugs, which would have been chewing on willow bark and, you know, mixing boar's bile and, you know, henbane and all of these, you know, weird esoteric, like code words and code names for different roots and herbs. And then we broke it up with a game. And that was so much fun. It was great.
It was a fill in the blank. You would say, what would this list of ingredients, which sounded insane to our normal modern day, like, what if you mixed all these together, what would you treat with this? Because like the diseases we have today still existed back then. So people have rheumatism today, and you take some pills. And here was this list of ingredients that we look at and we're like, yeah, taking some vinegar mixed with a little bit of some herb isn't going to fix your rheumatism.
No.
But that's what they would take.
Yeah, exactly.
And so everybody was in the room would basically vote on which one they thought was correct. And like nobody in the room had any idea, really, because it was so far outside of normal.
And the craziest thing is we were taking most of those from 19th century books that Joseph Smith or doctors of the day would have had access to. It's not like we were pulling these from, you know, 16th century witching books or something. These were things that they would have likely been used or using for these methods. And I have to tell you, like, in our show notes, we had planned for like 12 of those slides.
Oh,
and we
that's too many.
Yeah, that's too many. And also, we had to shave off a lot of time. So those were the first ones to go.
I was impressed with the level of research that you had done. Because you're welcome. Because Cody presented enough information in his first half that if he had gone any slower, like he could have done a full hour on that. But but it was very obvious that you had taken an incredible amount of knowledge and pulled out just the points that were important to your theory that Joseph may have used it. So you were talking only about plants that were common in the hillside country of Ohio around Kirtland when these revelations were happening. You were only talking about books that had been published that everybody would use as like, this is the recipe book, the medicine book we would have for our common day stuff that would be in the area where Joseph was. So you weren't just talking about, well, and then over in the Northeast when we're doing, no, you were like, we're going to talk about Joseph. We're going to talk about things that are contemporary. So then by the time you started, because you focused on what we have published about, you know, like what did these meetings look like when the founders of the church are getting together, having revelations? Like we have descriptions of those events. And then you're describing this plant that Cody had just talked about and some of the side effects of it. Okay, let's read this account from that the church is like, yes, this is a real account.
Yeah. From Joseph Smith Jr. or from Heber C. Kimball or from, you know, prominent Mormon, you know, movers and shakers and founding people saying that this is what was happening. We were ordaining these people, which included, you know, wiping oil on them, which was probably consecrated anointing oil, consecrated in
air quotes,
and, you know, partaking of the Lord's Supper, which included the sacramental wine, and then having incredible reactions, and even going as far as saying Harvey Whitlock reacted badly. Reacted to what? The Spirit?
That's weird. Why would you react badly to the Spirit?
Exactly. And then at some point, Parley P. Pratt was like, he was describing these things that were not edifying, that were horrible, and saying, fearing our inexperience and lack of judgment. And it's like, inexperience and judgment in what? What are you talking about? In the Spirit? Were you praying wrong?
Yeah. You also pointed out specific examples that are, again, everything you did was verifiable. Like, yes. It was verifiable by the church. Like, that's how deep your research went. It's like, what did the church say about this? Who are the... So when you're mentioning a name, it's a name that can be looked up. You weren't saying, well, I think this person saw. I was like, no, here's the direct quote from this person about this event.
Yes, exactly.
And that was very much appreciated.
Yeah. And this is also one thing that we contributed that nobody has ever contributed to this theory, and it's the fact that Lumen Walters was Joseph Smith's mentor for using these entheogens. many people have called Lumen Walters his magic mentor because he taught him all about mesmerism, hypnotism, all of these occult practices using a seer stone. But because the supporters of this show were kind enough to fund a cross-country trip, and I was able to go to the Ontario County Records Departments and sift through Lumen Walters' probate records, I found his inventory lists, and we found what we need in the inventory that he was using in order to create psychoactive medicines. And we presented that, and that was one thing that garnered a lot of questions from a lot of people. Where did you find that? I went and got it myself.
You went to the source.
I went to the actual source. I sifted through his microfilm records for 3 hours, sitting there while the various people that were working there were like, what is
this guy doing here?
This is weird. I mean, and so because I was able to go out there, and because the patrons have funded the ability to go out there to this place by myself, we were able to present that as the piece of information that's the new scholarship that turns this from something of a synthesis of all this information into new historianship. This is new information that nobody knew about before. That makes this very, very powerful.
Yeah. I thought a good point that you made was that there isn't a smoking gun document, because it would be great to have something written in Joseph Smith's hand saying, so then I put this psychoactive thing into the wine, and that wouldn't that be great?
Yes.
So you were very open that you don't have that, but what you do have is a lot of bullet holes
everywhere. There's exactly, and everywhere we look, and that's one thing we did present at the end was the limitations and alternate theories, because we did have to acknowledge that there is a fair amount of confirmation bias. Because once we start looking at some of these accounts through this lens, it becomes hard to not interpret it through only this lens.
Yeah, as soon as somebody says, look how many red cars there are, and suddenly all you can see are red cars.
Exactly, yep.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that red cars still don't exist.
Yes, and that's the point that we made, is we are just acknowledging that confirmation bias exists and that we are influenced by it. That doesn't nullify the theory, but we just have to acknowledge it as good historians and scientists. We have to say that this exists, and the more research that we get, the more we can parse out and get rid of confirmation bias and get closer to historical reality, as close as we possibly can get, right? So that was, I think, probably one of the most powerful points of it, is acknowledging the limitations and the alternate theories. And, my favorite part about all of this is Christopher Smith, who I met on Thursday morning and said, please come to this Saturday at 10. He said, I don't buy it. I've talked to him before about it. He said, I don't buy it. He was the first person to come up to me after the presentation, and he offered his hand in a handshake, and he said, Bryce, I want to give you congratulations because you thoroughly convinced me.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, it was a really good presentation, you guys. I don't want to undersell this. It was amazing.
Yeah, and it's going to go up soon. We hope to post up the video really, really soon of it once we get the audio. But that was I feel like a feather in my cap, because this was a PhD Mormon historian who's been studying this for the past 8 years to get his doctorate in this field. Said, I don't buy it. He saw the presentation, he read some of the booklet, and he came up and said, you convinced me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to...
That was amazing.
It was amazing. I'm looking forward to seeing where you go with it from here, because you were able to create a very strong case for entheogen uses. I have a really hard time with that word. I'm sorry, everybody.
It's a weird one.
Yeah, the E thing. In 1 year of solid research, this is what you were able to present, and it's very convincing. Well, what's going to happen in 5 years from now? Because it's not, not like you were done. It's not like, I did this presentation, now I'm going to be done. You're like, no, there's still more.
This is the foundation.
This is the surface.
Exactly. And that's one thing. Okay, so I think I've said this before, but a long time ago, I made a promise that I'm going to put out 2 books, and I made this stupid assertion that I could do it in 6 months, because I didn't know what it was to write a book. I figured I'm cranking out 20 pages of script every 2 weeks. Extrapolate that out, 6 months, I should have about a book and a half to 2 books worth. That's not how actual historiographies work.
No.
There have been dozens of biographies made on Joseph Smith. None of them have incorporated this.
Yeah.
This is the beginning of the seminal biography on the Joseph Smith-entheogen theory. That's what this is.
Yeah, and what you just wrote was chapter 1.
Exactly. We wrote the abstract for it. That's exactly it. So I think that was one of the main takeaways, is that the people that I spoke to after the presentation, there was not a single dissenting opinion. Not a single person could punch a hole in it. Not a single person could offer a better alternate explanation. And every person I talked to said that was amazing. Like that, I buy it. I totally buy it.
There was a woman who was sitting like 2 seats down from me, and I overheard her talking to her travel partner, whoever's next. And she said, as soon as we were done, she said, "Well, I don't know if I believe it, but there's got to be more research on it that's going to happen, right?" Because she didn't buy it, but she wanted to know more, and she was looking forward to finding out more.
Exactly.
Which, that speaks to it, to somebody who... So I didn't see her name tag, but I could tell that she would have been somebody who put True Believing Mormon on there. Mm-hmm. Because I did see her in other presentations, and whenever there was something pro the church is perfect, she was like, yeah. And when it was anything that was like, well, maybe the church is this true, she's like, no. Mm-hmm. So if you can get a True Believing Mormon to look forward to finding out more, there is a bright and delightsome future for you, Bryce,
I think
in this field of research.
I have to say, so like I said, I spent most of the time carrying around a box of booklets under my arm and handing it to everybody I could get a conversation with. Anybody would give me the time of day, and I'd talk to them for 2 minutes or 20 minutes, however long I could get them. One person said, "I don't buy it," and he was from the Mormon History Association. Cody and I talked to him for 20 minutes, gave him a booklet. At the beginning of the conversation, he
No way.
No. At the end of the conversation, he said, "This is interesting. I'm going to have to read the booklet. I look forward to learning more about this." That was the hardest opposition we came against the whole time. And that's the thing is, like, this has been so much work. Cody and I have spent so much time on this. We ran through our presentation once over the phone and basically twice in person to make sure that we had it hammered down, we had the timing right.
It was tight.
We've been working on the presentation itself for about two and a half weeks, and the booklet for 7 months. Like, it has been hard research. We have been really pouring our time and efforts into this, and I just want to say that, like, that is what my life is now.
Sure is.
I mean, and I love it. And coming to this conference just brings that all to fruition. Like, it embodies every bit of this and makes it feel like it makes it realized that all of this work that I've been doing for all this time isn't for nothing. And that makes it feel so good.
I suddenly understand why whenever you and I record our show, why you're always so like, oh, this is easy, but this is great. It's like, oh, that's right, because you're not doing any like deep research for my show. We're just reading the Doctrine and Covenants.
Yeah.
Like, no wonder we're having so much fun.
And I have to muzzle myself so much because I'm like, well, I know what happens to this person in 3 months. And like that's
we're
a spoiler.
Not there yet. We're not there
and
yet.
That's why I don't, when you look up the Wikipedia pages for people, I just keep my mouth shut while you tell everybody about it, because I'm like, if I say anything, I'm not going to shut up about them for 15 minutes, and I'm going to spoil everything in the timeline for Marie. So, like,
right now, the church only,
myself.
In my opinion, the church only exists up to 1833. Like, nothing happens after that.
After
Everything's fine.
Yep. Joseph lives on, and he brings the saints out here. And no, wait.
Yeah. And we're actually recording this from Missouri, not Utah. Wait.
Totally. But all in all, Sunstone was so much fun.
It was great.
I really enjoyed it, and I'm so glad that I could experience it with you.
Well, thank you.
And today experienced Temple Square and the Church Conference Center. And
that was so much fun.
It has been a very fun weekend for me. Thank you, Marie.
You're welcome, and thank you.
Thanks for joining me today as well.
Anytime.
All right, that's going to do it for today. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you soon.